Hello, scientific writers. You might have gotten conflicting advice about what voice to use in scientific writing. Some people will tell you never use the active voice, only use passive voice. Other people will tell you never use passive voice, only use active voice. Which of these is correct? Hi guys, this is Brian from the Scientific Writing School. My advice is whenever somebody tells you never do this or never do that, take it with a grain of salt. Most advice that says to never do something is overly zealous on one side or the other. So my advice is to use active voice most of the time in scientific writing, but use passive voice when it's more appropriate. So let's talk about when it's more appropriate. First, let's make sure that everyone is on the same page when we're talking about active voice and passive voice. What do those mean? So when we're using the active voice, we are emphasizing who is doing action. So who the agent of the action is. Whereas when we're using passive voice, that is going to hide the agent, de-emphasize the agent, and talk about the receiver of that action. So who or what the action was done to becomes the subject of the sentence. Let's look at some examples here. I wrote a manuscript for publication. That's active voice. The verb is wrote. It's an active verb, and the agent is I. Whereas the passive version of that sentence would be a manuscript was written for publication. It doesn't say who wrote it. Another example is a draft of a mellifera genome sequence was published in 2004. That is passive because it's not saying who published the genome sequence, and it's emphasizing the genome sequence as the main topic of the sentence. Whereas the active version of that sentence would be, we published a draft of a mellifera genome sequence in 2004. Now you might go into your paragraphs and start looking at every sentence and classifying them into either active or passive. But not all sentences are going to have active voice or passive voice. Some sentences have neither voice. Some people assume that any sentence that is not in the active voice must be in the passive voice, but that's not true. The passive voice combines a state of being verb with the past participle of the main verb. Also keep in mind that sentences with pure state of being verbs, also known as linking verbs, are not passive voice, but they're not active voice either. Those are those sentences that are neither active nor passive. So here are some examples. Arabidopsis thaliana has 5 chromosomes. So its state of being is to have these 5 chromosomes. The catalyst is required for the reaction to occur. Neurons are crucial in regulating many physiological processes. The absorption capacities for X were higher than those for Y. So has, is, are, and were are examples of these pure state of being verbs or linking verbs, and these sentences are not active and they're not passive. So there are times when it's better to use the active voice, and there are times when it's better to use the passive voice. The first time that it's better to use the passive voice is when the agent is less important than the receiver, and you want to de-emphasize the agent. In other words, you want to emphasize the receiver of that action. So use the passive voice in that case. This is why materials and methods is usually written in the passive voice, because it's important that we're talking about the materials and we're talking about the methods that are used in the research rather than who is doing it. A second situation in which the passive voice is preferred is when the agent is obvious. Now this also goes along with materials and methods. When you're writing the materials and methods and you're talking about how the experiments were done, it's obvious that it's the authors of the paper that were the agents of that action. So you don't need to state that. Situation number 3, when you don't need to use active voice and passive voice is preferred, is when the agent is unknown. So if you have a field study, let's say you have a field of crops and you come there to take some samples or take some observations, and your entire crop is destroyed, you don't need to say who destroyed it. So maybe there were vandals that came in and destroyed it. Maybe there was a windstorm that knocked everything over. or maybe a herd of deer came through and ate your entire crop. When you're going to write about that, you can just say, then the crop had been destroyed. And you might explain why it happened, but you don't have to say who did it. A fourth time you might want to use the passive voice is when you're developing a topic and you want to keep the flow of ideas, and you want to keep the emphasis on the ideas, not on the agents. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the first point, but it's a little bit subtly different. And the fifth reason you might want to use the passive voice is to have some variety in your paragraphs. So let's say you are using the active voice and you're saying, we did this, we observed that, we found that. It gets kind of monotonous to the reader. And so you might want to throw a passive sentence in there to put the emphasis back on the materials or on the results and break up that monotony. All right, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the Scientific Writing School YouTube channel for more videos on scientific writing related topics. I'll see you next time, and happy writing.